avoidants tend to have very predictable relationship histories. Dismissive and fearful avoidants tend to follow the same patterns, but for different reasons. By the time this person reaches their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, if they haven't been working on themselves, their relationship past, their history, it tends to follow a very predictable pattern. So let's get into it. First, dismissive avoidance. Dismissive avoidants tend to have their long-term relationships with emotionally unavailable partners and their short-term relationships with emotionally available partners. And it all goes back to their childhood, where they received consistent childhood emotional neglect. Growing up in households where their basic needs were met, food, clothing, shelter, but their emotional needs were not met. Often households where you don't talk about feelings. But not only do you not talk about feelings, their own feelings as children were rejected, dismissed. They may have even been reprimanded for talking about feelings. So what they learned is that emotional closeness is not safe. Talking about feelings is not safe. Because if you rely on anybody for any sort of emotional need, you're going to get rejected. You're going to get disappointed and perhaps even outright abandoned. Plus, they personalize this emotional neglect, growing up to feel unlovable and defective. So they put walls up, and their subconscious fear is, if my partner gets in on the other side of my wall, they're going to figure out that I'm defective, that I'm not lovable, that I'm not good enough, and they're going to reject and abandon me. So they go into relationships with their walls up. Well, when they get into a relationship with an emotionally unavailable partner, they don't have to take down their walls. It feels safe. Even if this is a toxic person like a narcissist, it doesn't trigger their wounds because narcissists are also emotionally unavailable. There's no threat of emotional intimacy. So it feels safe, even though it's an unhealthy relationship. But when they get into a relationship with a partner that is emotionally available, especially one that treats them well, is consistent and loving, it feels very unsafe and it feels very triggering to a dismissive avoidant because now there's a pressure for them to be vulnerable in return, a pressure for them to meet expectations, a pressure for emotional availability. And that feels unsafe because in their mind, emotional intimacy equals abandonment. Vulnerability equals abandonment. Plus, the emotionally unavailable partner doesn't feel like anything all that special to them. So if they get rejected, abandoned by the emotionally unavailable partner, it would not be so devastating because that person's not all that great. But the emotionally available partner, if they love this person too much and open up too much, this person's going to reject them, and it would be devastating because this person is special to them. So they feel the subconscious urge to push loving partners away, to run away from that relationship, to protect themselves from what their unconscious mind perceives to be inevitable abandonment. And sometimes their conscious mind is aware of it too. But with the unavailable and even toxic partners, it feels safe. It does not trigger their wounds. They don't fear being rejected by this person, and they don't fear emotional intimacy with this person. Let's get into fearful avoidance. Fearful avoidants also grew up in households where they received consistent childhood emotional neglect. But in addition to that neglect, they grew up in households where they also experienced things like chaos, volatility, perhaps even abuse and trauma. So what they developed is a disorganized attachment. They have both an anxious attachment and an avoidant attachment. So when they get into a relationship with a partner that's emotionally unavailable, such as a dismissive avoidant or a narcissist or something along those lines, it'll trigger the anxious side of the fearful avoidant, and they will try to earn the love from the emotionally unavailable partner. Plus, there's a comfort in familiarity. They grew up in unhealthy environments, toxic environments, traumatic environments. So it feels familiar to them. It feels comfortable. It feels safe. The toxicity feels safe subconsciously. But when they get into a relationship with a partner that is emotionally available, it triggers their avoidance side because the same fears exist as dismissive avoidance on the dismissive avoidance side of the fearful avoidant. They feel unsafe with the emotional intimacy. Plus, they completely distrust this person. They have a deep wound of distrust. They couldn't rely on their parents or caretakers because those people let them down, broke their trust. So the fearful avoidant has the subconscious fear that betrayal is imminent, and they become hyper-vigilant in relationships with loving and consistent partners, believing that betrayal is going to happen. And they start to self-sabotage this relationship to keep themselves safe. They become hyper-vigilant, looking for inconsistencies, looking for flaws in this person. And then eventually, the dismissive avoidant side gets fully triggered and they push this person away. Plus, it's unfamiliar. They grew up in unhealthy environments, and a healthier partner, well, it doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel natural. It feels foreign to them. So they are inherently distrusting when someone's showing up consistent and loving. But then when an emotionally unavailable partner comes along, it feels exciting. It feels like there's a spark for the fearful avoidant. But the fearful avoidant will often confuse this spark for butterflies. It's not really a spark. It's not really butterflies. What it is anxiety. Their subconscious mind is telling them that this person is not safe. But when they get in front of a person that is emotionally available, that anxiety from their subconscious isn't there, and they will confuse it into thinking that this person is boring. So they will more naturally gravitate towards emotionally unavailable partners, and they will naturally push away the available partners until they become self-aware and realize that this pattern is because of their attachment wounds. Both fearful avoidance and dismissive avoidance can absolutely break this cycle, but it requires them to be self-aware and willing to work on themselves. Now, becoming self-aware requires self-reflecting. Self-reflecting requires not avoiding, so they have to go against their programming. The human mind learns in repetitions. The more it repeats anything, the more ingrained and automatic it becomes. So when you have a lifetime habit of avoiding problems and avoiding self-reflection and avoiding accountability, it can be quite difficult to do the change, but they absolutely can do it. And for them to heal, it really does require therapy, especially with a licensed psychotherapist. But they can absolutely do it. They can heal and learn to become secure, but they have to want it. If this person doesn't want to do the work, it doesn't matter how badly you want them to change. They're not going to do it unless they want it. You can't change anybody. Only a person can change themselves.